Flowering bulbs are the secret to achieving a colorful cottage garden without too much work. Unlike seedlings that need babying and coddling, bulbs practically raise themselves.
So I'll share with you the 6 indispensable fall bulbs I must have in my garden.
I'll tell you my own experience growing them as I rank each as good, better, or best in 5 categories: visual impact, ease of cultivation, reliability, diversity, and the double value category is a cottage.
To find out which fall planted spring bulbs are indispensable for a colorful cottage garden.
This video is brought to you by flowerbulb.eu.
If, like me, you live in a temperate zone, then fall is the right time to start dreaming up a spring display, and nothing says spring quite like a cheerful daffodil.
When it comes to visual impact, daffodils shine. They get best in this category, as their bright color can be seen from a distance. For ease of cultivation, they also get best. Growing them couldn't be simpler. Just dig a hole 6 to 8 inches deep and add a bit of organic fertilizer if you want to give it a boost, and drop the bulb with the pointy end up.
They're not too picky about soil type or even location. They can be planted in a very sunny spot, or they can be planted under partial shade under a tree that loses leaves in winter.
Winter and springtime sun, followed by dabbled shade, is enough to nourish them so they come back stronger the following year. This cannot be said of most other bulbs.
They get best when it comes to reliability because I've yet to see a bulb that returns year after year, even decades after it's been planted.
Indeed, I inherited several patches of daffodils around my house from long-lost gardens of years past. And if you fertilize them and most importantly refrain from cutting their leaves after flowering, allowing them to die and dry up naturally, they will progressively become a fuller clump of flowers. They also are 100% deer and groundhog resistant, so they're perfect to grow in the outer edges of your garden.
When it comes to diversity, I rank them as better.
They only come in shades of yellow, orange, white, and a bit of pinkish color, but they come in several shapes and sizes, from large to small bulbs, and several variations of the trumpet shape.
But are they cottage? Well, I'll rank them as good in this one because I think they're best suited as a woodland plant.
I myself have decided to relocate some patches that had been in my cottage beds onto the front hill in my yard, just so that their post-bloom foliage is not on the way of my denser planting. As soon as they end flowering around March to April, that's the time when I want to plant other annuals around that space. So having the foliage there just didn't make sense for me. Relocating them to the bank in front of the house is the perfect spot.
That being said, I'm excited to try out some new varieties that should be best suited for a cottage garden.
Namely the Golden Bell and the Arctic Bell daffodils. They have smaller, distinct flowers that grow on shorter, wispy stems that should be especially good to enliven the edges of a cottage garden. But I'm still making sure to plant the larger, showier bulbs in areas I want a wilder, more naturalized display, as is the case with the strip of grass next to the road along the front of my garden. They should thrive in these conditions and take care of themselves, forming dense clumps of blooms that will provide extra color in a spot other plants would really find difficult to compete in.
Next comes the uncomplicated crocus.
It is often one of the first blooms of spring, and as such it deserves a space in every garden.
They take up little space and are perfect for adding to the edge of pathways. As for visual impact, I'll rate them as good.
They are smaller, but in mass they have the potential of completely transforming a space with their punchy color. For ease of cultivation, they get best. They don't need to be planted as deeply as daffodils, so 2 to 3 inches is generally good enough.
That makes them perfect for rock gardens and small crevices.
Nothing seems to eat them, and they are also quite reliable, coming back year after year and developing stronger and bigger clumps of flowers, so they deserve best in this category. For diversity, I rank them as good. You can find a bit of variation of size and color, but generally they're going to be mostly found in shades of blue, purple, and white, and some yellow to orange.
I'm excited to try the orange monarch snow crocus because I think its warm tone should fit well with the color scheme of the house.
But is it cottage? I would rate it as good in this category only because I think it's most at home in a rock or alpine garden, next to other early flowering blossoms.
Still, I think it's worth it to incorporate it into any garden to be the harbingers of spring.
And since it blooms so early and its leaves are quite attractive and they don't take too much space, they will never bother neighboring plants. Hyacinths are the next fall planted spring bulb that I've incorporated into my cottage garden.
Height-wise, they are a step up from the ground-hugging crocuses, so they can be used as edge plants as well.
That is how I have been using them in my front garden. They bloom in early spring in a similar time frame as daffodils and crocuses.
When it comes to visual impact, I'll rank hyacinths as better.
Its cylinder-shaped inflorescence calls attention from afar, and the intricate structures is also pleasing to see up close.
They have one advantage over other bulbs, and that is that they smell great.
Scent is something I don't often talk about in this channel, but hyacinths are worth having just for this reason. They do have relatively large bulbs, so they should be planted 4 to 8 inches deep. I would rather plant them closer to 8 inches deep so that as their foliage dies after blooming, I can safely plant annuals around the spot without risk of injuring the bulbs. They do best in well-draining and super sunny spots, so in terms of ease of cultivation, I'll rank them as better, since they do take care of themselves, but they need to be sited in good conditions to have good vigor from year to year. As with all bulbs, I let the leaves die out naturally after blooming to allow the bulb to store as much energy as possible, but I do trim the spent flower stalks to prevent seed formation that may drain energy from the bulb.
So in regards to reliability, I'll also rank them as better.
If given perfect conditions, they thrive and return year after year, but they might have a harder time in partial sun locations. When it comes to diversity, I would rank them as good. Most cultivars are on the cool tone spectrum of blues, purples, and bluish pinks and whites, but for those of us looking for warm tone color, there are a few yellow and warm pink ones.
I'm excited to plant the Gypsy Queen variety because it has the perfect salmon shape that should coordinate well with my red house.
Now, is it cottage?
I would say yes, and I would rank it as better in this category.
There's just something about their flower structure that proclaims cottage garden, and the fragrance also bumps it up in this category.
Of course, tulips could not go missing on this list. I've always had them in my garden, and for visual impact, they certainly carry their own weight.
They clearly rank best in this category. Their bold colors and shapes are anything but timid. When planted in mass, they utterly transform a landscape. They're like carnival tents that pop out of nowhere.
As far as ease of cultivation, I have to rank them as better.
Planting them is as easy as daffodils and hyacinths. In mid to late fall, dig a hole 6 to 8 inches deep and drop the bulbs with the pointy end up.
Here's a little garden hack. Cluster them together into groups of 10 to 20 bulbs when you plant them so that you have a better display the first year.
Clusters of tulips tend to give better impact than if they're just dotted around a space. They also do great in containers when liberally fed with fertilizer and packed with only an inch or two between them. Some hardier species and cultivars are more reliable from year to year.
But because most common varieties offered in the market tend to act more like annuals than perennials, I'll rank them as good when it comes to reliability.
But even with the more high maintenance varieties, there are tricks to have your tulips return and increase in number from year to year. You just need to be a bit more hands-on. First, it's important to select a very sunny and well-draining site if you want them to return.
A few factors will determine if your tulips return or not. It has to do a lot with the site that you pick because soil type makes a huge difference. If your soil is not friable, it will most likely make the bulbs rot during the summer. The other factor is that there might not be enough sunlight. As you can see on this side, there's plenty of sunlight, and that's why the tulips look much stronger. They've returned stronger this year, whereas on this side, because of the dappled shade of the tree, it has made for a more diminished display.
As soon as their blooms fade, I start to cut the flower stems to prevent seed head production. I do not disturb the foliage or tie it up or anything like that until it is completely yellow to brown. At this stage, I carefully lift the whole plant, making sure not to puncture or mar the bulb so it won't spoil. If you wait too long, the stem rots away, and you will not be able to find the bulbs with ease. I allow the uprooted plants to naturally dry in a breezy shaded area for about a week. Then, I separate the bulbs from the dried stems and store the bulbs in a well-ventilated, cool, dark place for the summer months. I've found that storing the bulbs in unglazed terracotta pots prevents rotting. By fall, I am able to plant them again. Generally, only the larger bulbs will flower in spring. Smaller bulbs tend to only produce one leaf for the first year, but with patience, you'll get even the smaller bulbs that multiplied to flower if you repeat this process for a year or two.
Fertilizing them when planting will also increase the chances that they rebloom.
Also, it's important to note that tulips need freezing temperatures to bloom, so they are more suitable to hardiness zones 3 to 7, although some species of tulips can be grown outside this range. When it comes to diversity, I rank tulips as best. There are so many varieties in incredible shades, sizes, and petal shapes. I love the double-flowered ones that look like peony blossoms. I also love the muted, tertiary colors of varieties such as La Belle Époque and Callaghan.
So, is it cottage? I'll rank them as better here. They certainly fit within the cottage garden, especially some of the species varieties.
But they are also perfect for more formal landscapes where their regal posture and bold colors fit right in. Iris is my next essential cottage bulb. There are many types of iris out there, so I'm gonna jump to the diversity category and immediately rank it as best. In recent years, I've experimented with the bulb Dutch irises and have loved the effects they have, especially when paired with my Ito peonies. But while I've been positively surprised by the bulb types, I'm going to focus on the bearded irises because to me, they stand in a category of their own. They actually grow from rhizomes instead of true bulbs, so their cultivation is slightly different. September is the best time to get bearded iris rhizomes planted.
September is just a glorious time to be in the garden, and it's the right time to start planting your bearded irises because they need a little bit more time to get rehydrated and get acclimatized and strong for winter so that they return in spring and bloom beautifully.
When you buy them, they're usually in a drier, dormant stage. They should be planted more superficially with the sprouting end completely exposed.
Bearded iris are strong and forgiving, so you can't really mess it up. There's one thing you need to remember when you're planting them. You gotta plant the rhizome so that it shows a bit over the top. You place it with the roots to the ground and leave the growing tip out of the ground. And if you do that, and if you water it and you have the right space, it's gonna do well.
I like to put them in a spot with fertile, well-draining soil for the first critical year, making sure they don't go through dry spells, so they can put on as much growth as possible in that first year. You may get lucky to have a bloom or two develop by spring, but the real magic happens in subsequent years as the rhizomes multiply and you get several flowering stems. They certainly have a huge visual impact, as even a single flower can call your attention from afar, so I'm gonna rate them as best in this category. Their ruffled sculptural quality is both solid and ethereal as they dance with the wind. After the flowers fade, like most bulbs, you cut the stems to prevent seed pods from forming and to clean up the space. But unlike other bulbs, bearded iris keeps their green foliage throughout the year. Bulb irises, on the other hand, act much like tulips and hyacinths, entering a dormancy after flowering. While September may be the best time to transplant bearded irises, you can do it as long as they are not flowering. They're easy to take care of, but they may need a bit of dividing every 3 years or so I'll rate them as better under ease of cultivation. Bearded irises are extremely reliable, blooming year after year. They're also deer and groundhog proof, so I'll rate them as best in this category. When it comes to diversity, they also get best just because of the myriad of beautiful colors to choose from. And in the is it cottage category, they get a resounding best as well. Finally, we get to lilies. I found lilies to be one of the easiest bulbs to have. I plant them in the same way I would a tulip, 4 to 6 inches deep, pointy end up, and they need almost no follow-up maintenance other than fertilizing here and there and maybe dividing them if they form a large clump over the years. They almost never need staking, so for sure they get best in the ease of cultivation category. They're also as reliable as daffodils, and if placed in sunny and well-draining spots, they thrive and multiply. They also tend to improve year after year, getting taller and more packed with flowers as they get established in the spot. They grow quite well in partial shade spots, especially varieties such as the tiger lily. Therefore, they deserve best in this category. When it comes to diversity, you can find many colors of lilies, many types, from the bright colored Asiatic ones to muted or pastel tones, usually in the warm tone range. There are also huge tree-style lilies that produce magnificent tall stems with large flowers.
This year I'm making sure to add some of those to my garden to add impact to my cottage borders.
I would give them a better in the diversity category, but I'm almost persuaded to give them a best. And of course, under visual impact, they would get a best plus if I could, because they are the most showy of bulbs in my opinion. I feel that when they're in full bloom in mid-July, that's when my garden feels the most magical. In a cottage garden, they even benefit from a bit of partial screening to tone down their vibrant color, as I do by planting them amongst fennel or other wispy plants. Nonetheless, their elegantly curved blooms are the perfect focal point for any cottage garden, and that's why I give them a best in the last category. Is it cottage?
So if we tabulate the results, it becomes clear that I have bearded iris and lilies tied as the indispensable bulbs for a cottage garden.
What I like the most about them is just how easy they are to grow and how much impact they provide and how well they integrate with the rest of my cottage garden.
But to be honest, I think all these bulbs are indispensable to have in any cottage garden as each fills the right niche.
If you want to learn more, go to flowerbulb.eu for information and inspiration. And I hope you have fun incorporating more easy to grow flowering bulbs into your garden to achieve your own piece of paradise.